My new book, Awake, Observe, Shape, Transform, is now available on Amazon, along with the 90-Day Transformation Journal. You'll find a link to these things in the episode description. Also, if you'd like to support this work, there are $10, $15, and $20 Patreon tiers with no locked content, just a way to say I value this. You can also visit the site and check out the growing merch store, shirts, tanks, hats, and learn about one-on-one sessions with me by clicking the About button. And don't forget, the YouTube page has the podcast and binaural beats for meditation, rest, and sleep. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh, and today I want to talk to you about something that everyone experiences on some level or another. Why so many of us give up before we even start. Why we can't follow through with that big idea. Why it's so hard to listen to our superconscious mind, or what we call the divine mind. Why we stay in situations that hurt, why we wait for permission, and why it sometimes feels safer to be stuck than to risk change. And finally, why we choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about learned helplessness, how we're trained to stay powerless, and how to wake up. Let's start with a bit of a trigger warning. Today I'm going to reference an experiment in the 1960s that involved dogs. And if you're like me and your dog is actually a reincarnated Buddhist Lama, or like mine, an actual emanation of Lord Vishnu, the all-loving and all-sustaining aspect of God, of course, then I understand that this is hard to hear about. But I promise you, if you can just get through that part and stick with me, it'll be worth it. So if you've ever heard of the term learned helplessness, let's start with where it came from. So back in the late 1960s, a psychologist named Martin Seligman, who later went on to pioneer positive psychology, conducted an experiment at the University of Pennsylvania that would change how we understand why humans do what they do, or really why they don't do what they should do. So he and his staff were studying classical conditioning, and they were using dogs. And what they found, accidentally, was a deeply unsettling truth about how living beings, humans included, respond when they believe they have no control. So here's how that went down. So they had two groups of dogs. The dogs were placed in pens with a floor that delivered a mild electric shock from time to time. I know, stay with me. Now, one group was taught to press a lever or a button or something that would stop the shock. It would turn it off. The other group was not shown a way to stop the discomfort. Later, they took those same groups of dogs, those two groups, and they put them in new pens. In the new pens, half the floor was electric and half the floor was not. But they were divided by a very short, low barrier that the dog could just step over. Well, the dogs who had control in the first part of the experiment just jumped the barrier. And remember, they weren't taught to jump a barrier. They weren't shown that half the floor was safe. They just took the chance and had the wherewithal to say, fuck this. But the dogs who learned that the pain was inescapable, they didn't even try. They just laid down and whimpered. They had been taught that nothing they did mattered. So even when escape was possible, they didn't move. We all know people like this. We've probably been these people, or maybe we're, under the right conditions, maybe we still are. That's learned helplessness. And it's not just dogs, it's us, obviously. I mean, you don't need to be strapped into a box to know what this feels like, or to have experienced it. It's the voice in your head that says, what's the point, right? I've tried everything. Nothing ever works out for me. I guess this is just who I am. It's the contradiction to the divine mind that says, hey, Why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? That's the divine mind. That's the superconscious mind. And this learned helplessness thing is the opposite of that. The divine mind has the great idea, right? It's that idea that you have and your body almost feels light and excited about it. But then the conscious mind, or the scared small self, pops in and gives you a list of bullshit reasons why you shouldn't do it. That's learned helplessness. It's the part of you that's been lied to enough times, disappointed enough times, abandoned enough times that you don't even look for a way out. And the real kick in the nuts is that you probably experienced all of that disappointment, all of that abandonment, all of those lies because you were listening to the conscious mind. And not to the superconscious mind, to the divine mind that told you to get out of that job, get out of that relationship, get out of that town, knuckle down, recommit to that dream and work a little longer because you're almost there. And what's even crazier is that the opposite of the small self, the opposite of the conscious mind, the thing that tells you no, right? The opposite, the superconscious mind, the divine mind, is poo-pooed and called the theoretical higher self. That the divine mind, the realm of good ideas, as Florence Scovel Shinn would call it, is just a theoretical idea, that the higher self is a theoretical, it's just a concept. It's a theoretical thing. And if you really win the dippy therapist lottery, you get one that calls it magical thinking. And I know some of you might be therapists and you live in that world and you're dying to correct me, so let me save you some time. I know what magical thinking is in a clinical sense. I know what the term means, but that's just not how I've heard some of y'all use it in staff meetings. I just don't think it's up to a therapist to decide what is unrealistic or what an unrealistic belief in yourself or anything else looks like. But I've seen this learned helplessness with clients and even some therapists that are billing your insurance for all the help they're giving you. I've seen it in mental health facilities. I've seen it in recovery centers. I've seen it in my own life. It's the person who stays in the abusive relationship. It's the artist that never shares their work. It's the addict who's relapsed so many times that they stop believing in the idea of recovery. But it's the soul inside you that still wants to rise up. It speaks to you through the divine mind, through the superconscious mind, but it keeps getting drowned out by the voice that says, sit down, you can't, that's unrealistic. Learned helplessness is the quiet training that we all go through. And most of the time, we don't even know it's happening. So let's go a little deeper. This conditioning starts early, right? School teaches us obedience, not inquiry. Sit still, don't talk, regurgitate. Right answers over inner truth. Follow the rules or face punishment. Right back to Carlos Castaneda, you live in a description of reality. From a very early age, you were beaten over the head with that description until you repeated it back to them. And if you grow up in a house where your voice doesn't matter, where love and affection are conditional, or where you're told that you're too much, that you're too sensitive, that you're too weird, that stays with you. And by the time you're grown, the world doesn't need to lock you in a box with an electric floor. You carry it with you. Religious dogma can do it. Workplace culture can do it. Consumerism does it. The algorithm does it. You've been trained to accept the shock. And the most dangerous part is that you don't question the source anymore. You just assume that you're the problem. Now, let's look at this from the lens of spiritual practice. Learned helplessness is not just psychological. It's spiritual anesthesia. It numbs the soul. Because what is spirituality really, other than learning or remembering your agency? The remembering of your inherent nature as awareness, as soul. But if your whole nervous system is conditioned to freeze, to submit, to stay small, then no amount of affirmation or mantra is going to work unless we address that first. And I think that's why so many people give up on their practice as well, right? Not just their dreams. They say, I tried meditation. I can't stop my thoughts. I tried journaling. Nothing changed. I said the affirmations, but I didn't believe them. It's not that's not failure. That's learned helplessness. You were trained to give up before you even began. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. So how do we know if we're operating from learned helplessness? Well, it turns out there are a few signs. If you avoid change, even when you're miserable, because the unknown feels more threatening than the familiar, you have a list of excuses why you can't do the thing, whatever the thing is. And more accurately, you make the excuses before you've even given it a shot. Maybe you downplay your desires. I've been guilty of this. You've convinced yourself they're unrealistic or selfish, and how convenient, right? Do you wait for permission, right? From someone else or from life or the right conditions, right? I'll go to the gym when I'm in better shape. I'll start eating right when I move. I've literally heard that excuse. I'm not kidding. My favorite was when I was doing jiu-jitsu and someone would say, I'd love to try it, but I have to get my cardio up. That's like saying I'm going to start running once I get my cardio up. That's ridiculous. Maybe you catastrophize, believing that trying and failing is worse than not trying at all. In other words, you keep yourself in the pain and suffering of your monotony to avoid the pain and suffering of possible maybe failure, right? This is a classic choose your hard scenario. It's all hard. So which is it going to be? You might as well choose the one that could reap you the most benefit. Maybe. This is, I'm sure some of you this is going to be foreign to you, but possibly you numb out with scrolling, with substances, with overworking, right? Work is a great excuse not to work on your dream. You're tired, so don't even try. We've all done it. So this stuff can be subtle. Sometimes it looks like procrastination or self-sabotage or just being realistic. And God, I hate that. But when we trace the root of these behaviors, they often come from a deep, quiet belief that nothing we do will make a difference. That was one of the lessons I got out of all those years of jiu-jitsu, actually. The idea of tiny gains. Everything matters. No move is too small. Nothing is too small not to try it. It all matters. The mind restructuring work that I do one-on-one with people is a great example. I see it as I'm hacking away at humanity one person at a time, one bad experience at a time. I put one more person on the highway, in the grocery store, at home with their family whose nervous system isn't still reacting to something that's no longer occurring, in the hopes that the space that gives them allows them to make different decisions and this change their reality. It's my karma yoga. It's my way of hacking away at this thing a little bit at a time. At least you did something, right? And that's one of the lessons that I just will always love about jiu-jitsu is that's not always big moves. Sometimes they're little moves and they keep you going. I mean, think about it, right? If you had two large ships and they're side by side, they're traveling parallel, they're going to the same place, but one ship turns its wheel just a little bit. That ship that turned its wheel just a little bit lands in a completely different place. That's how this stuff works. That's how we break ourselves out of the learned helplessness. It's tiny adjustments, tiny gains, little turns of the wheel. It doesn't have to be a big, massive thing. You just start making little changes. And then one day you find yourself in a completely different world than the one you were in. So, just as we learned helplessness, we can unlearn it. And it's not overnight, but moment by moment, right? Turn by turn, tiny gains. It all starts with simple awareness, knowing that it's happening. It doesn't start with shame or blame. It's just becoming aware. Notice the voice, the one that says, why bother? The one that wants to lay down and take the shock, right? When it speaks, pause. Don't argue with it. Just notice it. Challenge it. Challenge it gently. Is this true? It doesn't have to be a big deal. Again, is there another possibility? What would I do if I didn't believe this could change? Is there someone out there doing it? Why can't I? right? Reintroduce choice, even small ones. Remember, tiny gains, little turns. What time you wake up, what you eat, whether or not you respond to that text, reclaim your agency and do it through micro decisions. Remember, these don't need to be earth-shattering things. And if you feel they do, you might want to take a look at that. Or I can just save you the time and tell you straight up that you're making excuses, and that's also just this learned helplessness. So just fucking stop it. Look for the little wins. Don't carry it all at once, right? Just start moving little pieces. This is where the spiritual practice comes in. Not as like magical spells, but as training tools to remind you. You are not stuck. You are not broken. You are not at the mercy of your thoughts or the past or the world. You are a conscious being. You can acquire free will rather than just going with the thoughts that come out of the scared small self. So I'll tell you, there was a time in my life when I felt like I was stuck in some kind of a loop, mentally, emotionally, financially, just spinning my wheels. And I remember thinking and telling people close to me that this is just what life is, that it just wasn't meant for me. I'm not meant to be loved. I had a lot of stories, but that wasn't truth. It was learned helplessness. I learned to just be helpless in those areas of my life. And it wasn't until I sat with that, and I mean really sat with it, and took the advice of my now wife, Christy, that I realized it wasn't my voice per se. It was just these old programs. And what's funny is I really thought I was being rational. But the truth is that not only were they old programs, old ideas from my parents, but I was also spiritual. I was doing spiritual bypassing, right? And to be clear, my parents' ideas were meant to protect me, right? They were just doing their best, but a lot of it was the sarcasm of teachers, these unremarkable individuals that lost their fire. So they were dedicated to snuffing out my fire, right? This wasn't just the Bible thumping teachers at a Christian school when I was a kid. It was also the public school system. This was the administration, the entire staff. It was their judgment, their sarcasm, and the system at large. It was the power structure as well. So I started small. Read a book here, read a book there, started doing meditation, just little things. I remember reading books I didn't understand just to I was like, this has to click at some point, right? I started changing the way I made decisions. I made decisions like someone who trusted life, right? And slowly something shifted. I stood up. I jumped the barrier, right? So if you're listening to this and thinking, damn, I think I've been lying in this box, then good. That means you're waking up. So let's reframe helplessness, right? Not as a flaw, but as a signal, a red light on the dashboard saying something in you wants to move again. And here's the best part about all of this is once you start moving, even just a little, you teach your nervous system that action is possible, that freedom is real, that you are not a victim of your past, of your pain, of your programming, of your parents. You are the one who jumps over the barrier. You are the one who walks away from the shock. You are the one who says, not anymore. So, if this episode hit you in a real way, I want you to do something about it. Write down one thing, just one, that you are going to reclaim. Maybe it's your time, your art, your voice, your body, your breath. And with that, start making those little changes. I love you. Stay awake. Thank you. If the infinite spark of being has brought you any value, consider supporting the work. And you can do that by checking out Awake and the 90-Day Transformation Journal, both now available on Amazon. The links are in the description. If you want to support this work on a monthly basis, there are $10, $15, and $20 Patreon tiers that have no locked content yet, just support. You can also swing by the website, check out the merch store, learn more about working with me one-on-one, and as always, the YouTube page has full episodes as well as binaural beats to help you with your practice. So I'll see you next week. Thank you, and I love you.